Hi, I'm Maggie, and welcome back to my happy place here at Bramble Blossom. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I keep mentioning, starting seeds versus buying started plants. For me personally, to buy started plants would cost me probably a month's worth of groceries because I have a lot of growing space. And so it's just really not economical for me to buy started plants. So I do everything from seed with the exception of I may, depending if my onions get big enough in time, I may end up having to buy some onion sets because I was a slacker and didn't get my onions started when I should have. So that's just what works best for me. Again, I think I mentioned before, if you're starting out small, if this is your first time, buying a handful of started plants is not going to be that expensive. So I just wanted to kind of talk to you about what seed starting looks like. I know I talked a little bit about the planning before in terms of when to start things if you're going to start seeds. I haven't really talked about what seed starting looks like. So after I get my calendar filled out of when I need to start what, then I start gathering my supplies, which can look like a variety of different things. And I will show you my shelf that I use to start my plants on. I mentioned before, I use party cups for starting most of my stuff. These are ones left over from last year. I saved them, I washed them out. I'm cheap. So I have drilled holes with a drill bit in the bottom of all of them. And then I have some trays that I set those in so that I am able to water from the bottom. And these trays are pretty cheap. You can buy just this tray piece for about $1. Or you can buy them that have these little inserts in them that are really cheap and flimsy, and unless you're really careful, they're probably not going to last more than a year. And those also come with a really super flimsy clear plastic humidity dome. These are not clean. I think I mentioned before, I often do things that I know better than doing. Again, I'm not an expert. I am still a student, and I still make mistakes, and then I also still make bad choices because life happens, and there's not just a whole lot you can do about that except for adjust and try to do better next time. You can buy a seed starting medium in the store. On small scale, it's not bad to buy the pre-mixed stuff that they already have all together for you. It's a really light, fluffy mix, and there shouldn't be a whole lot of big clumps in it. If you do find big clumps, pull those out. I personally, because I tend to start a lot of stuff, again, because I do all of my stuff from seed, I tend to make my own. It's a little bit more economical for me that way. So I buy, there's compressed bricks of coconut cure. I buy those, and I do equal parts that, equal parts perlite, and an equal part vermiculite to give it a really light, fluffy, super absorbent quality to it. So I would take my cup that I was going to use and my seed starting stuff I have left. I mix it all up in a plastic tote and in my dining room during this time of year. So I would fill that up to a reasonable degree, and then you just kind of want to push it down so that there's not a lot of air bubbles in it. And if I were legitimately going to start seeds in this, I would probably want to fill it a little bit more, although I don't always. It depends on how much of my mix I have. And then if I were going to start something like, well, I have some tomato seeds sitting here. So if I were going to start my tomatoes, then I would put, show you here, I would kind of just stick my finger down in there a little ways and just drop the seed in there and then kind of brush the soil back over, or the, seed starting mix back over that. If I were doing something that has a much smaller seed, like lettuces, some of them have the teensiest little paper thin seeds. So I would put those on top and then just kind of dust the top of the seeds with some more seed starting mix. And then you want to make sure that once you have it started, you don't let the top of the soil dry out. One thing I recommend is like a spray bottle, that you can find in the cleaning supply section, right? That just kind of has a mist to it that you can mist the tops of the plants with. But then once things sprout, you'll want to water from the tray below them, because watering from the top can really stress out those teensy little sprouts. And I will go over and show you kind of my setup. Again, I will say this, and I will say this, and I will say this. You can make gardening cost as much or as little as you would like. One more note before I do that, though. I have all of my lettuces and things like that started in the party cups this year. And I will show you. I sowed them really thickly in my cups. I don't recommend that. It's kind of a do as I say, not as I do situation until you kind of get the hang of things. And I feel pretty confident popping them out of there and separating them out without damaging their root systems too much at this point. But that's probably not the best plan if you're just starting out. And so these little smaller ones that are just kind of plugs would be a good place maybe to start as a beginner. And then you could just put one, and I say that, but again, lettuce seeds are teensy little things, and so getting a hold of just one of them can be pretty tricky. But attempting to just put one seed in those little plugs, and then if you want to do a cut and come again type lettuce bunch of mixed greens, like a salad bowl they call them, then you could just plant the plugs in the ground a little bit closer together. So yeah, I will go over and show you my seed starting setup. So I wanted to show you guys a quick peek at my seed starting setup so you can see what all is kind of the bare minimum necessity, so it can help you to determine if you want to go that route or if you want to go the route of started plants. And I don't have anything fancy here, and it's going to get real bright as I move this curtain off to the side. So I am using, like I said, I use primarily party cups, and I have a shelf that I got from a home improvement store. I don't know what I'm allowed to say and not, so we'll just say I got it from a home improvement store. And we use it to, I just tore my curtain down. We use it to store my canning jars on in the off season, so it's kind of a multi-purpose situation. And right now I have 3 shelves of stuff started, and let me see, we can peek down here, and I don't honestly do don't do what I do. I sew stuff pretty um pretty heavily in my cups, and then separate them out just to try and conserve some space. But as you can see, we've got the plastic trays underneath here, because watering from the bottom is super important when you've got these teensy little delicate sprouts coming up. So I've got a variety of different lettuces and kale, and arugula, and then things that take a little bit longer, like my peppers, to sprout. Those have not kind of peeked through yet. I have up here some dill back there in the back, if that will focus, that has popped up. It's not, it doesn't want to focus, does it? Back there, I've got some dill. I've got some maybe onions or leeks. I started my onions really, really late this year, so I don't have high hopes on that. But party cups, and then these little guys, I got from a dollar store for $1 for 6 or 8 or 10 of them. I don't remember. And the trays that I use, I think are like $1. And then I'm not gonna focus directly on the light because they are super bright, but I got, they come in 2 packs, or you can just buy one. I got them from Walmart, and they were, I'm not sure if I can say that, but hopefully I don't get in trouble. I got them from Walmart. They are 5,000 lumen, and they're really cheap. The 2-pack was $20 roughly. So you don't need to spend, you know, hundreds of dollars on grow lights to be able to start seeds indoors. I mean, the biggest investment was the shelf, and I needed that anyway for storage. So if you have a shelf in your house, you don't need to buy one. You can do it on your dining room table. I know some people do that. Just finding a space where, you know, cats won't knock them over, or dogs won't eat them, or whatever else. Just kind of something out of the way a little bit, to put a couple of trays on and get your stuff started. I just realized one thing I forgot to mention with the seed starting medium, whether you purchase the bagged stuff or you mix your own. One tip is I would recommend making sure that it is hydrated pretty well, and then letting it kind of soak up that moisture for maybe a day or something before you start your seeds in it. Making sure that it's really hydrated will kind of limit the amount that maybe you have to spritz it to dry it, or spritz it if it gets dry. And then those plastic, the clear plastic humidity domes, if you do get trays that have those and you're using the little plugs, plopping those on top can help to keep the moisture in, so that the tops of the soil don't dry out while you are waiting for them to sprout. If you use party cups, I have put plastic bags over mine before, that I just had around the house, and then kind of have just, you know, put those off to the side and reused them as I started new things, to try and minimize the waste there. So that's options. Those are both options in keeping that moisture in the seed starting medium. Otherwise, again, just spritzing the top of it if it gets dried out, to make sure there's enough moisture for that little seed to burst forth into life. Thanks. Also, I mentioned in a prior video that some things you don't want to buy started or don't want to necessarily start indoors ahead of time. So I just wanted to quick touch on those things, the things that you will need to get seed for, regardless of if you're buying started plants for tomatoes and peppers and those things, which you can absolutely do. There are a few things that just really aren't recommended to start or to buy started. And some of those things are root vegetables. If you find those started, I would not encourage you getting those. I would not encourage starting them. Like carrots, turnips, radishes. Radishes, like I mentioned, are super quick anyway. They only take about 30 days, and you can also do multiple rotations of those throughout the growing season. And particularly in the fall, they get a whole lot sweeter when it gets cold. So that's a whole different experience with your radishes, as well as I mentioned roasting them if you're not a big fan of raw radishes. So those root vegetables, you're not going to want to start those. If you try to transplant them, the roots, which is what you eat, are going to get kind of wonky and curvy, and they just don't tolerate that too well. And then on the other side of that, things like squash, whether it's a winter squash or a summer squash like zucchini or the yellow crooknecks, cucumbers, though there is an exception to that, and then melons and those kinds of things, they tend to shock if you transplant them out into the garden after starting them yourself or buying them started. And in some cases, like with zucchini, it may not matter because those things will just produce and produce and produce. But if you are really looking to get the most out of things, then it's not necessarily a great thing to start those. They grow super fast, so there's not really a need to start them indoors or to transplant them. You can just plop them in a little hole in your garden and watch them go. And that's what I tend to do. Now with the cucumbers, I tend to like to grow interesting things that I can't find in the grocery store. And one of those things that I am desperately wanting to try is called it's got a couple of different names. It's called the mouse melon or Mexican sour gherkin, or I think kind of the most common name for that is a cucamelon. And they're just these teensy little cucumbers that look like a tiny, tiny watermelon. And the seeds are much smaller than a traditional cucumber seed because they are such a tiny thing. And they are notoriously hard to get started, particularly direct sowing. So I will be starting some of those inside. But I'm gonna have to really be careful about how I do that. I may make my own kind of cup out of something that's biodegradable, like newspaper, so that I can just plop the entire thing down in the ground. Now I know that there are, while I'm talking about that, there are those peat cups that you're supposed to just be able to plop right in the ground. I do want to kind of caution those. While they are biodegradable, it takes a long time for them to actually break down. I've used them before and had cups at the end of the season that were still partially intact, and so that can kind of restrict root growth as you go through the season. So if I ever use those, I do kind of tear them at the sides to make sure the roots have some room to expand. And also they dry out really, really quickly, and it actually sometimes can suck the moisture out of your seed starting mix. So those aren't necessarily the best thing, but if that's what you have available, then just make sure you're keeping it super hydrated. And when you do go to put it in the ground, give it a tear on the sides so the roots have some room to escape, or maybe like pull the bottom off of it if you can without ripping the roots up too much. So that's pretty much the basics of seed starting and the seed starting setup. If you have any questions, please, please let me know. I will be happy to answer them the best I can. Thank you again for joining me in my happy place here at Bramble Blossom.